Welcome to Great Minds with Lost&Found, the podcast that connects people and reimagines systems to improve mental health for youth and young adults. I'm your host, Joel Kaskinen. Lost&Found is a comprehensive nonprofit organization that aims to do more to eliminate suicide for youth and young adults in the United States. Now that you know who we are and what we're all about, let's get to the show. Welcome back, y'all, to the Great Minds with Lost&Found podcast. This is your host, Joel Kaskinen. We are recording today from Severance Brewing Company in downtown Sioux Falls, South Dakota. So just want to give a brief disclaimer that there may be some background noise. We might not have the best audio quality today, so please bear with us, but we are doing the dang thing, and we are here because it is Suicide Prevention Month, and it is our 30 Days, 30 Stories campaign, episode numero 2. I don't know why I just said numero. I'm not Spanish. Anyway, whatever. So I am here sitting across the table from local teacher, TikTok influencer, social media master, if you will, Gabe Dannenbring. Is it Dannenbring?
Yes, it is.
Did I get that correctly?
Yeah, you did. You did. And that was quite the intro. Yeah, you know, I'm a teacher here in town, and I got lucky one day and struck gold on social media and been running with it ever since, and just going to keep going until the internet doesn't want to see my content anymore.
Well, I hope that never happens.
Same here.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to be here, for sharing your story with us during this campaign, during this important month. Obviously, there is a great need for suicide prevention in the state of South Dakota and in the world right now in the year 2022. In the future years, we know that it's going to be great. So this storytelling campaign is huge for us. It yields a lot of reach for people that don't normally see the sort of content, people who don't normally hear these stories. And it's just really, really important to reach as many people as we can right now.
Yeah, absolutely, Joel. You know, this is something that I'm passionate about, and I see it. I've talked about mental health a little bit with my students, and I have a number of people that will reach out to me online, you know, on my platforms, and I've been looking for the right time to kind of talk about this stuff.
Now it is.
And it's the perfect time. You know, I'm going to be a total open book and just kind of spill the beans on everything. I'm excited about it.
We love it. Well, let's get into some bean spilling, if you will, then. And let's start. What is your connection to Lost&Found, first and foremost? And secondly, what is your connection to mental health?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, I've heard about Lost&Found once I moved to Sioux Falls, and I knew kind of your guys' mission and what you stood for. And I was like, oh, this is an awesome company. You know, I really value companies that are generally trying to do good. And then I got a message from you one night saying, hey, we'd love to have you on this podcast. We're doing this campaign. And I immediately thought, this is awesome. Like, let's absolutely do this. And that's how I got introduced to you guys. And now, you know, when with mental health, there's so many different avenues I could go down, you know, for me with my mental health, you know, when I was in college and there were some years that I kind of struggled, to now with my large platforms, I see how resiliency, which is one of the things that you guys talk about all the time, how important that is. Because, you know, right now on my social media, you know, I've got over 1.5 million followers, and I have these massive influx of comments coming in every day, and some people give me positive affirmations, some people giving me such negative comments, and there's so much that goes on, and it's really affected me emotionally. And one of the great things about being an influencer and a teacher is I can talk to my students about this stuff and talk to them about, hey, you got to be resilient, because there are bad people out there. There are people that are going to try to tear you down, and how you respond to that is going to change so much about you and how you feel about yourself.
Yeah. I think it's so special that you bring the work that you do and the challenges that you see with social media into the work that you do and the challenges that you see in the classroom with your students, because, I mean, the age difference there, your students are facing a little bit different challenges than what you're facing, but we're all humans. We all face similar challenges day in and day out. So why not talk about it?
Oh, absolutely.
So, has that always been natural for you, or did it take a little while to get into?
You know, it took a little bit. So a little bit of backstory on the social media. I never thought I was going to be an influencer. I never wanted to do it. And then one day on a whim, I made a video, and it was literally the third video I've ever posted on TikTok. And it got 40 some million views in 48 hours. It was incredible. And it just took off. And I thought to myself, okay, I got a little bit of a platform now. Let's try to run with this.
Yeah.
You know, let's see what happens. And here I am 2 years into it, and it's gone seemingly well. And it's made me really think about like my role as a teacher. And people all the time are saying teachers need to be role models. They need to, you know, they need to be role models. And there's so many schools that think about social media in such a negative way. And I was one day kind of thinking to myself, you know, I've got two options. I can either address this stuff head on and realize social media is here to stay and going to be here forever, or I could be the teacher that acts like it doesn't exist and never talk about it. Yeah. And I chose to go the route of saying, you know, I'm going to embrace this. I'm going to show students, hey, here's how you should behave correctly on social media. Hey, here's how you deal with negativity on social media and how you should treat people on social media. And I'm addressing it head on. I want to be a role model, you know, on social media, because in my classroom, I've had so many issues that have started from stuff on social media. And kids don't know, one, how to handle it, and two, what is appropriate and what's inappropriate to say.
Yeah. So my background is in education actually as well. So I used to work in higher ed, so slightly different age demographics, but similar sentiments and similar practices. But I often think through that lens of education and like, how am I showing up as an educator? How am I showing up as a teacher? How am I showing up as a coach, a mentor? You know, the list goes on. And when it comes to my social media presence, I've always approached social media in that same vein. Like, I am going to show up real, show up authentically, show up as myself. And, you know, I curse and I post photos of me drinking, but like, I also post like great captions of like rambling when I'm having a bad day and I'm spiraling. But I post captions of like celebrations of weddings and funerals and like best friends getting engaged or having babies, you know, that sort of stuff. So like, I feel like it's a very performative act when it comes to social media. But like, if you approach it from this way of, I'm just trying to be real and I'm trying to be myself and I'm trying to add this element of humanity to it and not just be posting to post and add to the noise. I think that's where people like you and your platform and how you talk about it, and people like us with Lost and Found and our, you know, Instagram is literally written into our advocacy strategy as an organization. We utilize these channels to cut through the noise, to speak out on important topics and things that we want people to see. And because we know that social media isn't going away and people are all over it, that yields a great following. It yields a great impact. It yields great reach. And all of that ultimately makes stronger and more resilient communities. So I think what you're doing is really, really cool. So I'm thrilled that you're here. I'm thrilled that you're talking about it with your students, and I'm thrilled that your students seem to have a positive reception of it.
Fairly positive. You know, they love giving me a hard time. You know, I'll make a video.
That's my favorite thing is seeing what they like, the banter that they have with you.
Oh, it's so funny because there'll be some kids that, you know, view me as a celebrity, you know, and they'll be like, oh my gosh, I've seen you on TikTok. Then I've got other kids who, when they'll hear that, they'll roll their eyes and be like, this guy, like he's our teacher, you know, he's nothing special. And it's so funny. I love talking about this stuff with my students because there's so many of them now where they'll say, hey, I'll ask them, you know, what do you want to be when you get older? And they'll say, I want to be a YouTuber, or I want to be a content creator, which is awesome. You know, it's like, go for it. You know, if me as a dorky science teacher in South Dakota can do it, why can't these kids? You know, the world is so open now to young people, and they can accomplish so many different jobs that don't exist. And, you know, most teachers don't really have the expertise to talk about. I would say I'm probably one of few teachers in the country who can really talk about what it's like being an influencer and being a teacher, you know?
I would probably go out on a limb here and say that that's accurate, that you are one of the few that can do that. I mean, I don't know any other teachers who are also influencers. So Yeah, I want to kind of shift gears here away from social media a bit. Obviously, the whole conversation is going to focus on social media and the mental health aspects of it. But I really want to get into our 30 Days, 30 Stories campaign and the fact that you're participating in it so graciously. You're willing to share your story. You're willing to be vulnerable. So our podcast episodes that we're doing this month, in the month of September, so National Suicide Prevention Month, all 4 of these episodes are part of our 30 Days, 30 Stories campaign. So our storytellers have agreed to then also come on as podcast guests and have this conversation. The goal, however, is not just to have a conversation. Obviously, it's for us to connect. It's for us to get to know each other. It's for us to build resilient communities together and to empower each other to share stories and get to know one another. But it's more importantly, like, our goal is to share the resources that we've found that are helpful to increase awareness of the issues that our neighbors and our friends and our family members are facing, as well as empowering each other to stand up and speak our truths and share our stories. So with that in mind, I've got a couple of questions for you.
Dive in. I'm ready.
So yeah, really just focusing on those kind of elements of things. I want to hear from you, and I think our listeners, probably knowing some of the people that tune into the podcast and also knowing who follows our social channels, I think they want to know, like, the personal experience with mental health that you've faced, and then how that relates to your work both as a teacher and educator in the space of youth and young adults, as well as how you teach them, about social media.
Absolutely. I'm part of the generation where we started hearing about mental health kind of when we were in high school. All of a sudden you felt this kind of shift in how people approach mental health. And I never really thought too deep about mental health when I was in high school. And then all of a sudden, junior, senior year, I graduated 2016. I started hearing about mental health and people started talking about it. And I became a little bit aware of it. And then when I went to college, I ran on our cross country and track team in college. And I moved far away from my hometown, and I really started feeling the stress of being away. I felt the stress of pressure. I felt the stress of having to make something of myself. I felt the stress of literally knowing nobody, and I had to adjust to it. And I'll never forget the first day that I felt the feeling of anxiety. I was sitting in my education class, and I just... My heart was just pounding, and I just felt like my chest was heavy and my skin was burning. Like it was an awful feeling. And I remember sitting there thinking, what is this? And I'm like, oh crap, I think I'm anxious. I was like, I think this is what that is. And then as an 18-year-old male, I was like, how am I going to now, how am I going to respond to this? And to be frank, I responded in an awful way. I responded awful. I was just like, I want to get rid of this feeling. I don't want to feel this. I want to dodge everything that's making me anxious.
Sure.
What was making me anxious? Responsibility, just so many different things. And, at that point in my life, I kind of, just started partying and really, I studied fairly hard. I ran pretty hard, but I partied harder. and
Been there, done that.
And it was the worst way to cope with that feeling. And then I remember there was one day when I went home for the summer, and it was about 2 years into college, and my parents sat me down and they're like, dude, are you okay? And I kind of, thought about, am I really? And my immediate reaction was kind of putting on a wall and be like, what do you mean, am I okay? Like, yeah, I'm fine.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I approached it. And then about 10 minutes more into our conversation, my parents were like, hey, have you ever thought about seeing a counselor? And I was like, you know what? Yeah, I should. And I said, yeah, I said, you know what? Something I need. Let's do this. And I started seeing a therapist, and it was really, really hard for me right away because I had the mindset of, crap, people who are going to these therapists, they're not tough, they're weak, there's something wrong in their life. And on paper, I had everything I wanted.
Yeah.
And once I went to the counselor, he was this, former track star runner in college. And he changed my perspective, completely changed it. And I told him right away, like, hey, I don't know about this. And he was great. He said, you know what, that's fine to be unsure about this. Here are my intentions when we come here. And he just talked about bringing a different perspective on things and talking through problems. And once I started doing that, it changed my life. You know, it truly did. It made me look at things so much differently and made me realize that the feelings that I had, they were okay. And it was, you know, that was the start in my kind of, you know, mental health journey in thinking about what is important, you know, how do I help myself? And then I got to a stage when I myself now feel pretty good. You know, there's days I still feel anxious, but I feel like now I'm at a stage where I can now help other young people get through whatever they're struggling with. And, you know, one of the things I think about a lot is you never know who's truly struggling, because this therapist that I saw, you know, we built such a great relationship. I ended up going to him for 3 years. And then after a year, I stopped going. And then when the social media stuff started taking off, I started seeing him again.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget this, because it was a really hard thing to deal with. When I started seeing him again, about a month later, he committed suicide.
Oh, no.
And it just hit me like a ton of bricks. And I was like, oh my gosh, the guy that has helped me through everything, he was struggling the entire time. And a week before I got the phone call, I asked him, I said, hey man, how you doing? Like, how are you with this? And he goes, oh, I'm fine. I'm good. And then
Common response.
yeah,
Sadly. Yeah.
And once that happened, I was like, oh dang, this is real. You never know who's going through this. And now I really want to spread the message that it's okay to feel crappy. It's okay to feel anxious, feel depressed, to have these issues that you feel, and it's normal.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you know, one of the things that I love that you guys talk about is resilience. And that's what I'm huge on, is we got to be resilient, because it's really easy to roll over in the dirt and, you know, just want to quit, but we can't just quit. You know, there was a time in my life where if I would have quit when I wanted to quit, I wouldn't be able to be having the impact on people I have now. And
Absolutely.
it's something that's tough, you know,
Yeah.
but resiliency is so important.
100%. Two thoughts. First, sorry for your loss. Obviously, we are in this work because we all have a connection to suicide. We all have a connection to mental health.
Mm-hmm.
We understand and we empathize and we know how tough those losses are. So sorry.
Appreciate that, Joel.
Second thought, just want to make it public on the podcast. I am someone who corrects people, if you will, in like a name of education, not like correcting. You use the word commit. We don't like to use the word commit in the field of mental health and like healthcare. We like to use the phrase died by suicide. We
Okay.
like to say someone completed suicide. Commit just has a negative connotation. So those are my first two thoughts. Following that, backtracing all the way back to something that you said like earlier in the conversation. You said that your parents were the first ones
Yeah.
to like really kind of address things with you.
Yeah, it was my dad.
That's really cool. I think
Mhm.
that is something that we don't see,
Yeah.
especially in your generation and older, you know, my generation, our generation. We don't see that a lot. You know, our parents, we're not trained, we're not taught, we're not equipped with the same language and the same understanding of mental health that people your age and lower are. Our generations are going to be the generations that shift that and change that and kind of make it more acceptable and more welcoming and more accessible for all people to talk about. And so I think it's really, really cool and really fascinating and unique that your parents, I presume they still live in Yankton.
Yep.
I guess I'm just making assumptions here, but like small town South Dakotans are talking to their 18-year-old male son about mental health. I think that's really cool, and I want to acknowledge them.
Oh
for a
yeah,
minute.
you know,
So,
it was a conversation that I never thought my dad would bring up.
Yeah.
And you know, he's the generation where pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
Yeah.
And you know, when he said that, you know, is like, you know, you should maybe start seeing a counselor, and I've got some recommendations for you who you should see. I was like, oh, if my dad is going to
That's
do
cool.
it, and he's Mr. Manly Man, you know, he is Mr. Coach, Mr. Hard Knocks, you know, I mean, he played college football. He's like, you should do this. And that's all it took. All it took was one guy saying, hey, you should do this.
Yeah.
One guy that I trusted doing that. that changed my life. And now there's so many other people that are out there that they need that guy. They need the one guy that they trust, who they think would be the last person who would be struggling or had struggled or seen a counselor to say, hey, you should give this a shot.
Yeah.
That changes everything. 100% of my conversations that I've had with people that have gone to a counselor or a therapist or whatever terminology we want to call it, they have all recommended it. Every single one. And almost every single one said that they were a bit remorseful before they went. Almost every single one of them. And I think that's super important. And obviously that's all anecdotal, but still so many people recommend it once they kind of put their foot in the water. They realize, oh, this is huge. And there's a reason why they're professionally trained, why these counselors and therapists are trained, because they know what they're doing. And they're a fantastic tool to have.
Yeah. I tell people all the time, my personal anxiety kept me from seeking medication, seeking therapy, seeking what have you. And it was this endless cycle of like, I would try to make the call and I wouldn't be able to. I would try to go to an appointment. I wouldn't be able to. And I just was in this like endless cycle. And when I first went to therapy, not just on like a one-off occasion, like after a death or like after something traumatic had happened to me, but like I said, I'm going to commit to this and I'm going to, like I'm going to take this seriously. That first conversation of showing up and being vulnerable and saying to my therapist, I'm not sure about this and I'm not sure where this is going to go, I think is so important because they see that in every single one of their clients.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not something we speak about. So I think you are whatever the phrase is, nail on the head, nail on the money, whatever I'm trying to say. Like that's, it's so true. It's so accurate.
Yeah, I think what it takes to get more people to go to see a counselor and a psychologist and a therapist is just saying, hey, it's all right to feel weirded out right away. It took me a couple times before I was comfortable. There was a lot of times when I'd be sitting in the waiting room with my head down, trying to avoid eye contact, thinking, why am I here? This is embarrassing. And toward the end of it, I was like, heck yeah, like I'm here. This is awesome.
I show up, I'm like bringing coffee and like dancing in the lobby.
Yeah, and it's like that's what it takes. And you see the other people in the waiting room. And when I first started seeing a counselor, I was like, crap, these people are making fun of me. They're judging me. What they think that something is wrong with me. That's what I always thought about was people would think that I'm broken. There's something wrong with me. No, you're just a human being. There's nothing wrong with you for feeling these emotions, feeling anxious, feeling depressed at times. There's nothing wrong with that. That's just being a human. It doesn't mean that you're weak. It doesn't mean that you're less than somebody else or somebody else is tougher than you. That's not what it means. It just means you're a human being, which every single person is a human being.
Absolutely. I think that's a great place to pivot to our next question because humans, obviously, we have emotions, we have feelings, we have thoughts, we have the ability to make choices for ourselves. So my next question, kind of related to our goals for the podcast for the 30 Days, 30 Stories campaign, is focused on awareness raising. So I want to ask, obviously in the influencer space, obviously in the education space, you're raising awareness of mental health needs. You're probably talking about your own experiences. You're probably talking to students, parents, families, peers about their experiences. What are you doing to raise awareness of mental health challenges or just general challenges that youth and young adults face that might impact their mental and physical health?
Yeah, I think spreading awareness is something that's really challenging because some people will be like, oh, I want to talk about it, but I'm scared to talk about it. And they want to talk about the importance of mental health, but they don't want to feel like they're the one who's struggling. And, there's so many emotions that come with it. For me, I think that, spreading awareness is just by talking. Just talk to somebody. If you have a conversation with one person, you talk to one person about mental health and mental health awareness, that is a lot more than 0 people. That's a lot more. That one person you talk to could talk to somebody else and talk to somebody else, and it trickles down the line. It's just having that conversation. For me, I've got a large platform. I've got, million and some followers. It's easy for me to say, oh, I'm going to reach a huge demographic here really quick and talk about this mental health. And then almost turn some people away thinking, well, I don't have a large platform. Whatever I say isn't going to make a difference. All it takes is one person. You kind of light that match that's going to spread the fire. And it's so important to do that. All you got to do is talk to one person and it will spread. If you make a difference in one person's life, I guarantee you they're going to tell somebody else about it. And it's going to keep just getting further, and it's going to change the stigma about mental health. And it's going to make people much more comfortable talking about it and realizing it's all right to feel this way. Yeah. It's okay to struggle at times. It doesn't mean that you're not a man. It doesn't mean that you're not tough. It means that you're man enough to admit that something's wrong. That I think that's huge. Yeah. I'm kind of going on a deterrent here, but I see a lot of guys who are so scared to admit that something is wrong, and it's not being a man to hide how you feel and hide your emotions. It takes a lot more, manly traits to own it. We talk a lot about toxic masculinity. It's very toxic just to be like, hey, bury your feelings. Yeah. Don't talk about it. What I think it truly means to be a man is being open. Talk about those things. Because if you talk about yourself, you're going to help somebody else.
I could not have said it better myself. Thank you so much for that little diatribe. I'm obsessed. Someone on this podcast listening is probably thinking we're a bunch of progressive liberals, but that's fine. I'm very here for this diatribe. I keep thinking about something as the more our conversation goes. I keep thinking about this thing, and actually it might be a little bit of a stretch for me because I learned it when I was working in higher education as events and special events, camps, conferences, large scale programming stuff. And so it's very customer service. It's very hospitality focused, but for me, it's something that stands out both in those worlds, but also as well as my work in suicide prevention. And that is this metaphor that it's not the elephant in the room that is going to cause the problems and get people to speak up. It is the mosquito in your ear.
Yeah.
And so what that means is it's not the big overarching things. It's not the death of a family member. It's not the breakup. Yes, those are one-time things that are going to happen in your life that are going to set you back. But it's the everyday nuances and challenges that you're facing. It's I'm struggling with my body image, or I'm struggling with this overwhelming sense of dread, or I'm just not sure who I am and I don't know who to turn to or who to talk to or how to get support. It's those minor, if you will, that's obviously not minor, but it feels minor inconveniences that are ultimately going to add up to be the death of someone.
Yeah.
And while, yes, we do see suicide, deaths happen after other deaths or after losses or after divorces or breakups or what have you, I think the thing that I think about, especially when it comes to masculinity and being a man living with mental health, is it's always for me been those little things. I have lived with anxiety for my entire life. You've lived with anxiety for a long time. I think many of us have lived with anxiety for a long time. But how do we talk about it?
Yeah.
We aren't told that those little things that are stressing us out every day are ultimately going to be the things that break us.
Yeah. The masculinity thing is huge. And I think about it all the time because right now, when people talk about, toxic masculinity, people immediately think that if someone's talking about it, they are this far left, liberal, crazy person. You fill in the blank. There's a lot of people that feel that way. And that isn't how it should be looked at. With talking about toxic masculinity, I'm the type of guy politically, I'm right in the middle. I'm right down the middle. And I can recognize that there are times of toxic masculinity.
Sure.
And we need to address those. There are times that you need to talk about your feelings, and you don't have to be this macho guy 24/7. That's not what we're supposed to be as a guy. I saw this UFC fight couple month or two ago, and I wish I remembered this guy's name, but he had just won his fight. UFC fighters, the manliest of guys, and he gets done with his fight, and he says, "Hey, and he started talking about mental health awareness, and he said, I would rather have you crying on my shoulder than me be crying at your funeral." And that was
That's
like
a great
yeah,
point.
yeah. And this was the manliest of guys. And that was another thing that showed me that as men, we should talk about this. It doesn't mean that you're weak. It doesn't mean that you're whatever adjective you want to fill in the blank, or I think it's adjective, noun, whatever it is. I don't know. I'm not a teacher.
I was just going to say, you're not an English teacher.
Yeah, no, whatever it is, fill in the blank. Yeah, that's why I teach science. Whatever it is, it doesn't make you weaker of a guy to talk about it. And I think more men need to understand that. And in South Dakota, we still have this ideology of pull yourself up by the bootstraps.
Absolutely, we do.
So many guys that struggle with being open and talking about it. But once you do start talking about it, you understand, hey, you know what? I talked about this and the sky is still here. The world didn't end. It's okay to talk about this. I'm still going to have my friends. I'm still going to have everything else in life. Nobody's going to look down on you for saying, hey, I'm kind of struggling right now. And when you say that, people that are your really close friends, they're going to lean in a little bit closer and they're going to pay attention to what you're saying and they're going to have your back.
Yeah. I totally agree with all of that. I want to kind of move back into your education sphere, your social media sphere, as we bridge the gap here in our conversation. I want to talk about how you relate to the young men in your classroom.
Yeah.
And I want to hear both the perspectives of social media as well as the perspectives of the challenges that they face mentally and physically as young men.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's something I can tell that you're passionate about. It's something we have not talked about on our podcast or necessarily explored as a topic area in our content that we create and provide as an organization. And I think that this feels like the right space to explore that.
Yeah. One of the things that I do have a lot of conversations with young men about is what it means to be a man. What does that look like? And what should you be as, like I said, as a man? There's so many times when I'll see a kid who will be rude to someone, being a bully. I see a lot of bullies, and I try my best to pull the kid after class and say, hey, I saw what you did. It's not cool. That's not being a man. If you want to be a man, this is how you treat people, and you treat people with respect. You build people up. You don't punch down. You build people up. And I've seen how young boys will treat women, and I'll see that and say, boys, that's not how you treat girls. That is not how you do it. They are your equal. You are not better than them by any means. And what you're doing is rude. You're not going to objectify them. You're not going to treat them poorly. And I really try to tell these boys these lessons early on. And so then they think about it as they get older, because it's so important that we tell young boys right now, hey, this is what you should do as a man. Here's what it is to be, to use your masculinity in a good way, because there's nothing wrong with masculinity. I'm all for a lot of awesome masculine traits, but we need to really emphasize those. And as men, there's a lot of natural toxic masculine traits that we want to have that we need to recognize right away and suppress those, and recognize when we are being that jerk of a guy, when we are being the dude who's bullying the little kid. We don't want to be that person. And I try to acknowledge that to my students and tell these young boys about it. And then I also see on social media, just the treatment of women is baffling to me. It's insane how I'll see these, really pretty girls on social media, and I'll look through the comments, and there are these guys with completely anonymous accounts who are just doing everything they can to tear them down. Just every mean thing that you could possibly say. And I see that stuff, and I talk about that in the classroom and say, hey, just because you have an anonymous account doesn't give you the right to now try to tear somebody down. That's not what we're going to do here. You want to have a world where there's going to be positivity on social media, and it's important to talk about that. And I try to talk about that a lot and say, if you don't have anything good to say on social media, don't comment it. don't comment it, because I've noticed for myself, when I have a negative comment, that one negative
That's
comment
the one that you latch
will
onto.
overshadow the million likes that I get.
Yeah.
You know, it's amazing how that works. And I've felt that before. You know, this last week I had a video that, you know, all of a sudden I get, you know, about 10 million views on it. And it gets a 1.2 million likes. I'm like, awesome, this is cool. But I see 5 comments of someone tearing me down. I'm like, dang, what am I doing wrong here? Then I start feeling bad about myself. And I then look in the mirror and think about, I'm not going to let those couple comments bring me down. I have to be resilient. And I wish that we would have both conversations of telling these young people, don't leave the negative comments. And I wish we could have the conversation with these other young people and say, you might get negative comments. Don't let it bring you down. You know, you need to be able to have things that can, you can reassure yourself that you're okay. And I do that all the time when I think about things that reaffirm who I am, how I feel, things that build my confidence back up. And without those things, I will let the online negativity just bring me down.
Yeah. I want to chat a little bit more about the bullying aspect, because I think when it comes to social media and mental health, a lot of that comes from self-comparison, from bullying, negative comments, that sort of stuff. So I want to spend a little bit of time there, and then I want to transition out and kind of close us out here.
Absolutely.
So let's spend a little bit of time there. What are some tactics that you have shared to, you know, or resources rather, maybe it's tactics, strategies, resources, whatever it looks like to you, that you have shared with yourself? Maybe it's something that you've found is really helpful. Maybe it's an account or a person that you follow. Maybe it's something like therapy. And then the flip side, what are some things that you teach your students to utilize?
So one of the best lessons I ever got was from my dad. You know, I love my parents dearly, and this is going to sound harsh at first, but the light is at the end of this story. So there was one day when I was really struggling with some of the negative comments that were coming in, and it just got the best of me. And I called my dad and I told him about it, and he goes, "Gabe, I want to tell you something. You're not that special." I'm like, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean I'm not that special? Like this is not what I'm looking for. And I was like, okay, well, what do you mean, Dad? And he says, you're not that special in this way. That person that left that comment on your video, they're going to the next person and the next person and the next and the next. And they are doing the exact same thing
to hundreds of people.
It isn't only you that they're doing this to. They're going to tear down the next person that they see constantly.
Totally.
And that's always stuck with me, thinking, okay, you know what? I'm not the only one that this person is doing it to. And that's something that I think about a lot. I really think about that a lot. And I try telling my students that there are going to be people that tear you down, and there are going to be people that are going to be bullies. That's where it's so important to have a network of people in your life that you can talk to, and to make sure that you have, like, I've got a list in my house of reaffirmation, things that I've accomplished, that when I feel like I'm down on, I'm down on my luck, not feeling good, I go back to that list and realize, hey, here are the things I've accomplished. I'm okay.
Yeah.
I'm not,
that's cool.
I'm not what people tell me, online. I'm not, whatever it is. I look at that list and it reaffirms how I feel. And that's what I tell young people that they need to do. Have that list. Think about, what are your accomplishments? It's okay to celebrate yourself. It's all right to look at your accomplishments and say, you know what? I freaking did that. That's what I did, and be proud of it. Even the smallest thing, you need to be proud of it and celebrate that. And when you have that confidence in that, even the smallest of things that you've done, when you build your confidence around that, you're going to be able to be so much more resilient and bounce back from people that are bullying. And in the classroom, I try telling kids all the time about why you shouldn't be a bully.
Yeah.
Because that's something that we don't really think about a lot is, hey, we talk about don't bully, don't do this, don't do that, whatever. We don't say, hey, here's why you shouldn't be a bully. It's because your words carry a lot of weight and they're going to bring this person down. That's really important. I think that's so important, is to really emphasize why. Why shouldn't I be a bully?
That's a great point. And honestly, you're so correct. We don't think about that. We don't talk about that. Wow, I'm like floored right now because that's something it's so funny because I think like we talk about in our work, what's your why? What's your why?
Uh-huh.
What's your why? Like we think about this constantly,
Mhm.
like why suicide prevention? Why
Yeah.
student programming? Why research and evaluation? Why social media? Like
Mhm.
we talk about this constantly, but why bully?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
we like this makes so much sense. I'm like
Yeah.
a eureka moment just
Uh-huh.
happened. Like light bulbs are exploding in my brain.
Yeah, I think about the why all the time. One of the quotes that changed my life was I was listening to this therapist on his YouTube channel, love his stuff, and he was talking about alcoholics and people who are addicted to drugs, and he was talking about, hey, we're flipped around on the questions we ask. We tell people, hey, why do you drink? Why do you do this? He's like, we're wrong. We got to ask people, why don't you abuse whatever substance? Why aren't you doing this? And that really makes you think about what's keeping me from doing this. And a lot of times
Yeah.
what keeps you from abusing substances is you've got responsibility in your life. You've got things that you have to wake up in the morning for. Otherwise, you have a lot of people who are disappointed. There's going to be a real world implications if you don't show up.
Yeah.
So I think about that all the time. Why?
Yeah. I have no other words because I think ending it with like, what's your why is so, that just makes sense. So transitioning here once again, we talk a ton about systems in the work that we do. So thinking the systems that improve or decline mental health and the risk factors and protective factors associated with mental health and suicide prevention. So things like risk factors are obviously your own mental health and well-being, but also things like lack of or access to healthcare, lack of financial means, a family of abuse or low income or whatever. A protective factor is having a great support system and a resilient community of support around you and the access to mental health care or physical health care or whatever those means might be. So I want to kind of round us out here by ending with systems and a conversation about systems, because I think education is a system that employs a lot of access to support and to resilience building
Yeah.
that isn't inherently spoken about, written about in education. Like when you think of the education setting, you don't think of resilience building. But I think by nature, teachers want to give back. They want to better a community. They want to focus on the strength of their students, the future of our economy, the future of our society, the future of our culture. And so I want to talk about that for a minute. So think about if you have a magic wand and you could change anything you wanted about your education systems here in Sioux Falls. You work as a teacher. You're serving young people, youth, and young adults in our communities. You want to change not only the education system to better support them, but you also want to make sure that we have all possibilities to serve mental health challenges. What are you doing?
Man, that's such a loaded. I love that question. I love that. When I think of schools, first thing that I'm doing is increasing our amount of counselors that are at the school. Right now at my school, we've got one per grade level. We have hundreds of kids per grade level, literally hundreds. That's not a good ratio. We need to increase the amount of counselors that we have in schools, because that it opens up the door for so many more kids to start having counseling at a young age and realizing, hey, it's okay to have this. This guy isn't going to fall. If I talk to a counselor, it's going to be okay tomorrow. That's one thing I would change. Next is money. Money is something that it sucks to talk about, but some people can't afford to have a counselor or a therapist, or they think they don't have the money for it. I wish that we would have it free. I wish it was free in South Dakota. If there's anybody that's listening to this that is struggling of, paying for it, man, reach out to me. I'm serious. Shoot me a message. Shoot me a message on my Instagram. It's just Gabe Dannenbring. Shoot me a message on TikTok. there's nothing more that I would love than to help somebody financially, seek the counseling that they need, because we shouldn't have people struggle because they don't have the money for something as simple as, being able to talk to somebody talk to somebody about their mental health.
Yeah.
Those are the first two things that I would definitely want to change.
I love that. Both great answers. Also, very sweet and kind of you. Most people would never do that or make that offer. So thank you. That's impressive. I also feel the same way. I tell people all the time, like, how can I help? Like, just text me. Like, I literally will drive you there. I will write a check. Like, even if it's not covered under insurance, like, I will figure it out. Like, I tell people this all the time. So I'm very grateful to have another person that's doing that same thing. I want to wrap things up here and close us out today. I think we're running short on time here. So I want to end things with final thoughts. If there is one thing today that you wanted to talk about as it relates to social media, mental health, education, totally off topic, but you just want someone that, like, young people who are listening to know, like your followers to know, what would that be?
I would say that it is impossible to make everybody happy. It is impossible. And one of the things that I think about a lot is I see on my social media's accounts, and it's so funny to me every time this happens. I'll look at my comments. I'll have one comment that says, "You are the best, man. I love you. Love your content." Then the comment above that, "This guy sucks."
Yeah.
I see that all the time, and I always screenshot it because it's such a good lesson for me, because I see those two things. You can make the same video. You can say the same exact thing. Half of the people are going to love you. Half of them are going to hate you. What are you going to do about it? What are you going to let
It's all in your control.
It is. Control what you can control. I'm going to control looking at the positive and thinking about, hey, there's half these people that love what I'm doing. I'm going to keep doing that.
Yeah,
the people that are
cool.
putting the negative comments, that are bullying, that are being jerks, I'm going to ignore that. Or try my best to ignore it. Sometimes they're really loud, but you can try your best to ignore it. Last thing I want to end on is, a message to all the guys that are out there. You're not less of a man to admit that, one, you're struggling with your mental health, and two, that you should go see a counselor and go talk to somebody. Doesn't make you less of a man. It makes you more of a man to do those things.
Yeah. Amazing. Thank you, Gabe, so much for sharing your wisdom, your vulnerability, your story with us. Thanks for participating in this incredible campaign that we have the privilege and honor of reaching so many people with. Thanks for joining forces with our organization and fighting the good fight. This is something near and dear to all of our hearts, obviously, and it's something that impacts literally everyone. So thank you.
Thank you, Joel. Thanks for inviting me out here, and I love what you guys are doing.
Thank you.
We're fighting the good fight. We're doing what we can.
Absolutely. I just want to end, listeners. I know you're going to hear this and not be able to participate. However, I want to give a shout out to Severance Brewing for hosting us tonight, for partnering with us for the podcast, allowing us to take up some space in their beautiful location, and to donate $1 off of every beer sale to our cause. Thank you, Severance. We so appreciate you. We love you. You're an amazing partner. Sad that our listeners will be hearing this after this event is over, but thank you, thank you, thank you. And until next time, stay well. Thanks so much for listening. Remember to subscribe, rate, and review Great Minds wherever you listen to your podcasts. For more information about Lost and Found, go to resilienttoday.org. That's RESILIENTTODAY.org. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube @Resilient Today. Until next time, do more and stay well.